The night is calm. Taiwan's capital, Taipei, is alive with the usual rhythm of a modern city. Neon signs flicker in Ximending. Night markets bustle with crowds. Young professionals grab late dinners after work. Students study in 24-hour cafes. The MRT trains run their final routes. Life is normal, predictable, safe. Across the Taiwan Strait, 110 miles away, the Chinese mainland is equally quiet. Xiamen's skyline glows against the dark water. Fuzhou's port sits still. But beneath that surface calm, something different is happening. In military compounds scattered across Fujian and Guangdong provinces, soldiers are moving. Not training. Not drilling. Moving with purpose. Naval bases are emptying. The People's Liberation Army Navy, the largest navy in the world by ship count, is putting to sea. Not a few vessels. Hundreds. Destroyers, frigates, amphibious assault ships, landing craft. Submarines are slipping beneath the waves, running silent toward predetermined positions. Above, at air bases inland, fighter jets are being armed and fueled. Not for exercises. For war. In Taiwan, intelligence officers are watching. Satellites are tracking. Radar stations are painting the picture. The movements are impossible to hide. You can't mobilize an invasion force in secret. But seeing it and stopping it are two different things. Taiwan's military goes to high alert. The president is woken. Emergency meetings begin. Calls go out to Washington, to Tokyo, to allied capitals around the world. And then, at 2:47 a.m. Taiwan time, the first missile launches. Not one. Dozens. Then hundreds. Ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, rising from mobile launchers scattered across mainland China. Their trajectories are plotted, calculated, optimized. They're not aimed at cities, not yet. They're aimed at Taiwan's defenses. Airbases. Radar installations. Command centers. Naval ports. The Patriot missile batteries that protect critical infrastructure. This is what modern warfare looks like in the opening minutes, not soldiers storming beaches, but autonomous weapons traveling at supersonic speeds toward targets identified months ago by artificial intelligence. Taiwan's air defenses engage. Interceptor missiles launch. Some incoming missiles are destroyed mid-flight, brilliant flashes in the night sky that light up the strait. But there are too many. Saturation tactics. For every missile Taiwan shoots down, 3 more get through. Explosions bloom across the island. Qingchuankang Air Base near Taichung takes multiple hits. Hangars collapse. Runways crater. Fighter jets that never got airborne are destroyed on the ground. Hualien Air Base, carved into a mountain on Taiwan's east coast, survives the first wave. It was built for this. But the naval base at Zuoying is hit hard. Ships in port are damaged or sunk. The carefully maintained submarine fleet, Taiwan's ace in the hole, has minutes to get to sea or be trapped. This is 3 a.m. 15 minutes since the war began. In Taipei, air raid sirens wail. People wake to a sound they've only heard in drills. Phones explode with emergency alerts. Social media floods with videos, amateur footage of missiles being intercepted, of explosions, of fires lighting up the night. The videos are shaky, confused, terrifying. Reality streamed live. But Taiwan expected this. Every adult has done military service. Every citizen knows where the shelters are. The MRT stations double as bomb shelters, deep underground, reinforced, stocked with supplies. People don't panic. They move. Families grab children and rush to shelters. The elderly are helped by neighbors. Within 20 minutes, the streets of Taipei are nearly empty. Taiwan has been preparing for this war for 70 years. By 3:30 a.m., the missile barrage begins to slow. Not because China is done, but because the first wave has achieved its purpose, degrading Taiwan's ability to defend its airspace. Now comes the second phase. Chinese fighter jets and bombers crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait, an unofficial boundary that has been respected for decades. Not anymore. Hundreds of aircraft, flying in waves. Their mission, achieve air superiority. Destroy what's left of Taiwan's air force. Suppress remaining air defenses. Taiwan's remaining F-16 scramble from hardened shelters and highway strips. Taiwan designed its roads to double as runways for exactly this scenario. The indigenous defense fighters, Taiwan's homegrown aircraft, also take to the sky. The air battle that follows is unlike anything the world has seen since World War II. Dozens of jets in close-range combat. Missiles, countermeasures, electronic warfare. Planes falling from the sky on both sides. But numbers matter. China has over 2,000 fighter aircraft. Taiwan has fewer than 400. Even with better training, even with defensive advantages, the math is brutal. By 4 a.m., China controls the airspace over the strait. Not completely, Taiwan's air defense is wounded but not dead, but enough. Enough for the next phase. The invasion fleet begins to move. While Taiwan fights for its life, the rest of the world is waking up to the news. It's evening in Washington, D.C. when the first reports hit. The president is pulled from a dinner. The National Security Council convenes immediately. The Situation Room fills with military commanders, intelligence chiefs, cabinet members. Everyone is asking the same question: is this real? Is this actually happening? The answer comes fast. Satellite imagery confirms it. The invasion has begun. China is not conducting a limited strike or show of force. This is a full-scale amphibious assault, the largest since D-Day. The American response will determine whether this stays a regional conflict or becomes World War III. The Taiwan Relations Act, passed in 1979, commits the United States to providing Taiwan with defensive weapons and maintaining the capacity to resist coercion. But it doesn't explicitly guarantee military intervention. That ambiguity was intentional, strategic ambiguity, meant to deter China without provoking it. Now that ambiguity has to become clarity. The president faces the hardest decision any leader can make: go to war with a nuclear-armed superpower or let Taiwan fall. The military options are presented. The 7th Fleet is already in the region: aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines. They can engage. American fighter jets from bases in Japan and Guam can reach the strait within hours. Long-range bombers can strike Chinese positions. But every action escalates. Every strike invites retaliation. And China has made its position clear for decades: Taiwan is a core interest. Non-negotiable. They will use any means necessary to prevent its independence, including nuclear weapons if their sovereignty is threatened. The president makes the call. The United States will intervene. Article 5 of the Mutual Defense Agreements with allies is invoked. An attack on Taiwan is treated as an attack on the democratic order of the Pacific. It's the only way to maintain credibility with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia. If America doesn't defend Taiwan, every ally in the region will question whether American security guarantees mean anything. The order goes out. American forces are authorized to engage. It's 5 a.m. in Taiwan. 3 hours since the war began. And now it's not just China versus Taiwan. It's China versus the United States. The first naval battle. The USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group is operating 200 miles east of Taiwan. It's been shadowing the Chinese fleet for weeks, watching, waiting. Now the wait is over. The battle group includes the carrier itself, a floating city with 5,000 personnel and 60 aircraft, plus guided missile cruisers, destroyers, and attack submarines. It's one of the most powerful military formations ever created. But it's also a massive target. China knows where the carrier is. They've been tracking it with satellites, with long-range radar, with spy ships disguised as fishing vessels. And they've built their entire military strategy around one goal: keeping American carriers out of the fight. They call it anti-access/area denial. A 2/AD. At 5:15 a.m., China launches its carrier-killer missiles. DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles launched from mobile platforms deep inside China. These aren't ordinary missiles. They travel at hypersonic speeds, maneuvering in flight, designed specifically to penetrate carrier defenses. The Reagan's defensive systems engage immediately. Aegis destroyers surrounding the carrier fire interceptor missiles. Electronic warfare systems jam guidance signals. The carrier itself takes evasive maneuvers, not easy for a ship that weighs 100,000 tons. Some incoming missiles are destroyed. Some are decoyed. But not all. One missile gets through. It strikes the Reagan's flight deck at over Mach 10. The kinetic energy alone, no explosive needed, punches through the deck like paper. The explosion below deck is catastrophic. Fire spreads through the hangar bay where aircraft are stored. Fuel ignites. Secondary explosions ripple through the ship. The Reagan doesn't sink, carriers are built to take punishment, but it's crippled. Burning. Listing. Dozens of sailors dead, hundreds injured. The ship has to withdraw. Fighter jets that were about to launch circle helplessly, looking for somewhere to land. Some make it to Japanese bases. Some don't. This is the nightmare scenario American planners have feared for 20 years. A carrier, the symbol of American power projection, taken out of the fight in the opening hours. But the battle isn't one-sided. American submarines, lurking beneath the surface, begin firing. Tomahawk cruise missiles launch from vertical tubes. They arc toward the Chinese fleet and toward mainland military installations. Chinese destroyers are hit. Amphibious assault ships, carrying thousands of troops toward Taiwan, take torpedoes to the hull. Some sink. Others burn. Meanwhile, American B-52 and B-1 bombers, flying from Guam, launch their own missile strikes from beyond radar range. Chinese air defenses engage, but some get through. Airbases in Fujian province are cratered. Supply depots explode. By 6 a.m. Taiwan time, the naval battle has no clear victor. Both sides have taken heavy losses. The Taiwan Strait is littered with burning ships, oil slicks, and debris. Rescue operations are impossible, the battle is still raging. But the Chinese landing forces are still coming. Amphibious assaults are the most difficult military operations to execute. You have to transport thousands of troops across open water, land them on a hostile shore, establish a beachhead, and then push inland, all while under fire. It requires perfect coordination, overwhelming force, and accepting massive casualties. China has been preparing for this operation for decades. They've built the world's largest amphibious fleet. They've studied every historical beach landing, Normandy, Incheon, the Falklands. They've trained in mock-ups of Taiwanese beaches. They've used AI to simulate every possible defensive response. But no amount of preparation eliminates the chaos of combat. The first landing craft hit the beaches near Tainan, on Taiwan's west coast, at 6:30 a.m. These aren't World War II-style boats, they're modern hovercraft and amphibious assault vehicles, capable of crossing beaches and moving inland. Chinese Marines pour out, taking immediate fire. Taiwan's defenders are ready. Machine gun positions, artillery, anti-tank missiles. The beaches have been pre-sighted for years. Taiwanese soldiers know every range, every angle. They open fire. The Chinese take horrific casualties. Bodies fall on the beach. Vehicles are hit and explode. But more keep coming. Wave after wave. The doctrine is simple: saturate the defenses with so many targets they can't kill them all. Behind the landing craft, Chinese helicopters swarm overhead, dropping paratroopers inland to secure key roads and bridges. Some helicopters are shot down by surface-to-air missiles. Others make it through and unload their troops. By 7 a.m., China has troops on Taiwanese soil. Not many. Not a secure beachhead yet. But enough to expand. Combat engineers are clearing obstacles. Heavy equipment is being unloaded. Tanks are rolling off landing ships. Taiwan's military, outnumbered but defending home ground, counterattacks. Taiwanese tanks move up. Artillery pounds the beaches. Infantry engages in close combat. The fighting is brutal, chaotic, urban in some areas as the battle spills into coastal towns. Civilians are caught in the crossfire. Families huddled in basements as shells land above. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, military and civilian alike. Doctors and nurses work in blood-soaked emergency rooms, performing surgeries without enough anesthesia, without enough supplies. This is what war looks like up close. Not clean. Not heroic. Just horror. By 8 a.m., the battle for the beaches is still undecided. China has a foothold, but Taiwan hasn't broken. The defenders are holding. For now. Japan enters the war. Japan has been watching this unfold with growing alarm. Geographically, Japan is impossibly close to the conflict, less than 100 miles from Taiwan at the nearest point. Japanese islands in the Ryukyu chain have a direct line of sight to the battlefield. More importantly, American bases in Japan are critical to the U.S. military response. Kadena Air Base in Okinawa is the most important Air Force installation in the Pacific. Yokosuka Naval Base is home to the 7th Fleet. If America is fighting China, it's doing it from Japanese soil. China knows this. At 7:30 a.m. Taiwan time, Chinese missiles begin striking U.S. military installations in Japan. Kadena takes hits. Runways are damaged. Hangars destroyed. Misawa Air Base in northern Japan is also struck. This is the moment Japan has to decide. For decades, Japan's constitution has limited its military to self-defense only. But an attack on American bases in Japan is an attack on Japan's sovereignty. The alliance with the United States demands a response. The Japanese Prime Minister addresses the nation at 9 a.m. Tokyo time. Japan has been attacked. We will defend ourselves and our allies. As of this moment, Japan is at war. The Japanese Self-Defense Forces, one of the most advanced militaries in the world despite its modest name, mobilize. Japanese F-15s and F-35s scramble. Japanese destroyers armed with Aegis missile systems move to defensive positions. Submarines deploy. Japan's entry into the war changes the calculus. China now faces not just Taiwan and the United States, but a three-way alliance. The resources required to fight on multiple fronts strain even China's massive military. But Japan's involvement also brings the war closer to home for millions of Japanese civilians. Air raid sirens sound in Okinawa. Evacuation orders are issued for islands near Taiwan. People who woke up this morning in peace are now being told to seek shelter from potential missile strikes. The war is spreading. South Korea's impossible choice. South Korea is in an agonizing position. Technically, it has a mutual defense treaty with the United States. American troops are stationed in South Korea, nearly 30,000 of them. If America is at war with China, does South Korea join? But there's a complication that makes South Korea's decision uniquely difficult: North Korea. Kim Jong-un has been watching the Taiwan crisis unfold with intense interest. A war between China and the United States creates an opportunity he's never had before. American attention and resources are focused on the Pacific. South Korea might be drawn into the conflict. This is the perfect moment to strike. At 8 a.m. Korea time, 1 hour after Japan enters the war, North Korea launches an artillery barrage across the DMZ. Thousands of artillery shells rain down on South Korean positions and on Seoul itself, a city of 10 million people, only 35 miles from the border. South Korea is now fighting a two-front war. They have to defend against North Korea while deciding whether to join the fight against China. The military is stretched immediately. Air defenses engage North Korean missiles. Counter-battery fire targets North Korean artillery positions. The South Korean military mobilizes reservists, millions of trained personnel who can be called up within hours. The United States now faces an impossible situation. Fight China over Taiwan while also defending South Korea from North Korea? The military doesn't have infinite resources. Choices have to be made. Which ally gets priority? Commanders on the ground make the call: contain North Korea but don't escalate. The focus remains on Taiwan. South Korean forces, capable and well-trained, will handle the North Korean threat with American support, but the main effort stays in the Taiwan Strait. By 9 a.m. Taiwan time, 6 hours into the war, the conflict has expanded beyond anyone's initial calculations. Taiwan, China, the United States, Japan, South Korea, and North Korea are all engaged in active combat. The Philippines, Australia, and other Pacific allies are mobilizing. The entire region is at war. And the worst part? The sun is just now rising. The economic collapse begins. While the shooting war rages in the Pacific, another kind of war is beginning globally: economic warfare. Markets don't wait for official declarations. Within minutes of the first missile launches, trading algorithms detect the conflict. By the time humans wake up and check their phones, the damage is already done. The Tokyo Stock Exchange, the first major market to open after the war begins, collapses. The Nikkei drops 20% in the first hour of trading. Circuit breakers trip, halting trading to prevent total freefall. But it doesn't matter. When trading resumes, the decline continues. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is in freefall. Shanghai's market is frozen. The Chinese government shuts down trading entirely to prevent panic. When European markets open, they follow suit. London's FTSE drops 15%. Germany's DAX is down 18%. Panic selling is global and instantaneous. By the time Wall Street opens, the Dow Jones is already projected to drop 3,000 points at the opening bell. Investors are fleeing to safety: gold, treasury bonds, anything that isn't tied to China or the Pacific supply chain. Because the supply chain is the second casualty of this war. 40% of the world's container shipping passes through the Taiwan Strait or nearby waters. It's one of the most critical choke points in global trade. Now it's a war zone. Shipping companies are rerouting vessels away from the strait, adding weeks to delivery times. Insurance companies are refusing to cover ships that enter the combat zone. Ports in Taiwan and China are shut down. The electronics industry is hit first and hardest. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's semiconductors and over 90% of the most advanced chips. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is the single most important company in the global tech supply chain. Its factories, concentrated in Taiwan, are now in a war zone. Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, they all depend on TSMC. Cars, phones, computers, gaming consoles, medical devices, military equipment, all of it requires chips that are now unavailable. Companies with stockpiles will survive for weeks, maybe months. But eventually, the shortages will hit. By noon, major companies are announcing production halts. Car manufacturers shut down assembly lines. Electronics companies delay product launches. The ripple effects spread through every sector. Layoffs are announced. Spending freezes. The global economy, already fragile, begins to contract. Oil markets spike. China is the world's largest oil importer, and if the war disrupts shipping lanes in the South China Sea, oil prices will skyrocket. Brent crude hits $150 per barrel. Gas stations run out of fuel in some countries as people panic buy. The economic damage in the first 12 hours of the war will exceed $1 trillion. And that's before any of the long-term consequences set in. Cyber warfare and the digital battlefield. The war isn't just fought with missiles and ships. It's fought in cyberspace, in data centers, and the invisible infrastructure that runs modern society. China has some of the world's most sophisticated cyber warfare capabilities. The People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force has been probing American networks for years, mapping critical infrastructure, planting backdoors, preparing for this moment. At 10 a.m. Taiwan time, the cyber attacks begin in earnest. Power grids on the U.S. West Coast experience disruptions. Not catastrophic failures, not yet, but rolling blackouts in California and Washington state. Hospitals switch to backup generators. Traffic lights go dark. The attacks are surgical, designed to create chaos without triggering a nuclear response. Financial systems are hit. Banks experience DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service, that overwhelm their servers. ATMs stop working. Online banking goes down. Credit card transactions fail. For a few hours, the American economy runs on cash and goodwill. American cyber forces retaliate. U.S. Cyber Command, operating from Fort Meade, Maryland, launches counterattacks on Chinese infrastructure. Chinese power grids flicker. Internet access in major cities drops. The Three Gorges Dam, a critical piece of infrastructure, experiences control system malfunctions. Chinese technicians scramble to regain control, unsure if the problems are attacks or failures. This is the new warfare. No explosions. No casualties, at first. Just systems failing, data corrupting, control slipping away. But the consequences are real. People die when hospitals lose power. Planes crash when air traffic control goes down. Supply chains collapse when logistics networks fail. Both sides are careful not to cross certain red lines. Nobody attacks nuclear command and control systems, that would be suicidal. Nobody crashes commercial airliners. Nobody releases toxins from chemical plants. The unspoken rule is that cyber warfare has limits, because escalation in cyberspace can lead to escalation in physical space. But accidents happen. Mistakes happen. And in the fog of war, it's hard to tell the difference between an intentional attack and a system failure. India and Russia, the wildcard players. Two major powers have remained on the sidelines so far, India and Russia. Both are watching closely. Both have interests in the outcome. Both are calculating whether to enter the war or stay neutral. India's relationship with China is complicated. They're economic partners but geopolitical rivals. They share a disputed border where soldiers have clashed in recent years. China's rise threatens India's influence in Asia. But India also has no desire to fight a nuclear-armed neighbor. When the war begins, India mobilizes troops along the Himalayan border, not to invade, but to prevent China from trying to secure its western flank. The message is clear: if China wants to invade Taiwan, it has to keep significant forces tied down watching India. China gets the message. Divisions that were scheduled to deploy to the coast are kept in Xinjiang and Tibet. India has effectively reduced China's available forces without firing a shot. Russia's calculation is different. Russia and China have grown closer in recent years, united by their opposition to American power. They've conducted joint military exercises. They've coordinated their diplomatic efforts. But an alliance is not the same as a commitment to war. Russia's president faces a choice. Does he support China and risk economic sanctions, potential conflict with NATO, and a wider war? Or does he stay neutral and risk losing China as an ally? For now, Russia chooses the middle path. Public statements support China's legitimate security concerns. But no military aid. No direct involvement. Russia will sell China oil and gas at premium prices, but it won't send troops. This half measure satisfies no one but keeps Russia in the game. If China wins, Russia can claim to have been supportive. If China loses, Russia can claim it stayed neutral. It's cynical, pragmatic, and entirely predictable. Australia and the Philippines join. Australia has been dreading this moment. As a Pacific nation and a close U.S. ally, Australia knows it can't stay neutral. The ANZUS Treaty, the security pact between Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, requires mutual defense. At 11 a.m. Taiwan time, Australia announces it is entering the war. Australian naval vessels in the region move to support the American fleet. Australian F-35s deploy from bases in the north. Pine Gap, the joint U.S.-Australian intelligence facility in Central Australia becomes a critical node for communications and satellite tracking. This decision is controversial. Not all Australians support entering a war with China, Australia's largest trading partner. Protests erupt in Sydney and Melbourne. But the government argues there is no choice. If China wins and America retreats from the Pacific, Australia is alone and vulnerable. The Philippines, meanwhile, faces a similar calculation. The U.S.-Philippines alliance dates back decades. American forces use bases in the Philippines. The Filipino government has been growing closer to the United States after years of tension. When Chinese missiles fly over Filipino airspace heading toward Taiwan, the Philippines declares that its sovereignty has been violated. They don't officially declare war, that would be suicidal, but they allow American forces full use of their bases and airspace. Filipino naval vessels patrol the South China Sea, enforcing a blockade on Chinese shipping. By noon Taiwan time, 9 hours into the war, the alliance system in the Pacific has activated fully. Over a dozen nations are now involved, either directly or indirectly. The war is no longer localized. It's regional. And it's threatening to go global. The nuclear question. Throughout the first 12 hours of the war, one question hangs over every decision: will someone use nuclear weapons? China has about 500 nuclear warheads. The United States has over 5,000, with about 1,700 deployed and ready to launch. Both sides have submarine-based missiles that are virtually undetectable and unstoppable, the ultimate insurance policy. The doctrine on both sides is clear: nuclear weapons are for existential threats only. But what counts as existential? If Chinese forces are being pushed back and the invasion is failing, does China use tactical nukes to destroy Taiwan's defenses? If American carriers are being sunk and bases destroyed, does America strike mainland China? Both sides issue warnings. China states that any attack on the mainland will be met with all necessary measures. The United States responds that any use of nuclear weapons will result in overwhelming response. These are coded phrases, but everyone understands the meaning. Nuclear forces on both sides go to high alert. American ballistic missile submarines move to launch positions. Chinese mobile missile launchers scatter into the mountains, making them harder to target. Early warning systems are at maximum sensitivity, which creates its own danger. False alarms during high tension have nearly caused accidental nuclear war before. Leaders on both sides know that using nukes would be catastrophic, not just for their enemy but for themselves. Radiation doesn't respect borders. Nuclear winter would affect the entire planet. It's mutually assured destruction for a reason. But wars have a logic of their own. Escalation happens step by step. Each side responds to the other's moves. Red lines get crossed. What seems unthinkable at the start of a war becomes thinkable when you're losing. For now, the nuclear threshold holds. But every commander, every political leader, every citizen knows we're closer to nuclear war than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The humanitarian crisis. While the strategic and military picture dominates the news, the human cost is mounting. In Taiwan, thousands are dead. Military casualties are in the thousands on both sides. But civilians are dying too. Missile strikes hit apartment buildings. Artillery shells land in populated areas. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Morgues are full. Refugees are fleeing combat zones, but there's nowhere safe to go. Taiwan is an island. You can't walk to safety. Boats are trying to evacuate civilians to Japan or the Philippines, but the seas are filled with warships and submarines. Some refugee boats are hit by accident. Others sink in rough seas. On mainland China, casualties are also mounting. American and Taiwanese missiles have struck military installations, but some have hit nearby towns. Chinese state media isn't reporting the numbers, but the dead are in the hundreds, maybe thousands. In Japan, Okinawa is partially evacuated. Hundreds of thousands of people are moved to mainland Japan. Families are separated. Children are terrified. The elderly, who remember World War II, are reliving their worst nightmares. In South Korea, Seoul is under bombardment from North Korean artillery. Casualties are in the thousands. The city's subway system, built to double as bomb shelters, is packed with civilians. Hospitals are performing triage in hallways. The wounded outnumber the beds. International organizations are trying to respond. The Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, the UN Refugee Agency, all of them are mobilizing. But accessing the war zone is nearly impossible. The seas are too dangerous. Airspace is contested. Aid workers who do make it through find themselves overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. And this is just the first day. The morning after, what the world looks like at dawn. It's now 6 a.m. Taiwan time the next morning. 24 hours since the war began. The sun is rising again over the Taiwan Strait, revealing a transformed world. The water is thick with debris. Burning ships. Oil slicks. Life rafts with survivors. Bodies floating in the current. Rescue helicopters from both sides are trying to save their own personnel, but the battle makes rescue operations nearly impossible. Taiwan still stands. The invasion has not succeeded, yet. Chinese forces control small beachheads, but they haven't broken through Taiwan's defenses. The fighting is street to street in coastal cities, brutal and slow. Taiwan's military, though battered, hasn't collapsed. But the cost is staggering. Taiwan's air force is decimated. Most of its navy is sunk or damaged. The island's infrastructure, power, water, communications, is barely functioning. Millions are without electricity. Food supplies are running low. China's losses are even heavier. The People's Liberation Army has lost hundreds of aircraft, dozens of ships, and tens of thousands of soldiers. The invasion fleet took catastrophic casualties. For all its size and power, China has discovered the same thing every military learns: amphibious assaults are hell. The American military is bloodied but functional. The loss of the Reagan is a strategic blow, but other carriers are moving into position. American submarines have taken a heavy toll on Chinese shipping. Air superiority over the strait is contested but not lost. Japan has taken hits but remains in the fight. South Korea is holding against North Korea. The alliance is battered but not broken. The economic damage is almost incalculable. Markets are still in freefall. Supply chains are shattered. The global economy is entering what economists are already calling the Great Contraction, a recession that could rival the Great Depression. And the war shows no signs of ending. Both sides have committed too much to back down. China cannot afford to fail. The Communist Party's legitimacy depends on success. America cannot afford to lose. Its credibility as a Pacific power is on the line. Diplomatic efforts are beginning. The UN Security Council is meeting, though China's veto power makes any resolution impossible. Neutral countries, Switzerland, Singapore, others, are offering to mediate. But neither side is ready to talk. Not yet. Not while the outcome is still undecided. What happens next? The next 24 hours will determine whether this war escalates further or begins to stabilize into a frozen conflict. If China's invasion continues to stall, pressure will mount in Beijing to escalate. That could mean more missile strikes, more troop deployments, or, in the worst case, tactical nuclear weapons to break the stalemate. If Taiwan's defenses collapse and China gains a foothold, the United States will face the decision of whether to commit ground troops. An American amphibious counterlanding would be extraordinarily risky, but letting Taiwan fall might be politically impossible. The cyber warfare will intensify. Both sides will target critical infrastructure more aggressively. Power grids, water systems, financial networks, all of it is vulnerable. The risk of cascading failures grows with each passing hour. The humanitarian crisis will worsen. Tens of thousands are already displaced. Hundreds of thousands more will flee if the fighting continues. The international community will struggle to provide aid in an active war zone. And all of it happens under the shadow of nuclear weapons. Every day the war continues is another day where miscalculation, accident, or desperation could lead to the unthinkable. The lesson for the world. This scenario, China invading Taiwan, America intervening, regional war erupting, is not guaranteed to happen. But it's not fantasy either. Every element described here is based on real military capabilities, published doctrines, and strategic analyses that defense planners take seriously. The triggers are in place. The tensions are real. The militaries are prepared. All it takes is one miscalculation, one political decision, one crisis that spirals out of control. And if it happens, the world will change overnight. Not gradually. Not over years. Overnight. The global economy will collapse. Supply chains will shatter. Alliances will be tested. Millions will die. The war over Taiwan would not stay contained. It would pull in Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, and potentially others. It would become the largest military conflict since World War II. And it would happen so fast that most people wouldn't understand what was happening until it was too late. The best outcome is that this never happens. That diplomacy works. That cooler heads prevail. That the costs of war remain obvious enough to deter anyone from starting one. But if the sirens sound tonight, if the missiles launch, if the invasion begins, now you know what the world will look like by morning. A world at war. A world transformed. A world that will never be the same again. The question isn't whether it could happen. Military planners on all sides know it could. The question is whether we'll have the wisdom to prevent it. Because once it starts, there's no going back. No reset button. No undo. Just the morning after, and all the mornings that follow, in a world that has crossed a line it can never uncross. The night is calm. For now. The question is, how many nights do we have left?